In this video, I'm going to share some of the tips and tricks I've learned from playing TF2 for around 3,000 hours, give or take. Many of those hours, possibly about half of them, have been on Demoman, and so we're going to focus on some interesting and unusual techniques you can use when playing this class. I've tried to stick to specific tips that you can go and try out right after watching this video. So, no need for a lengthy intro, let's jump straight into it. Before we start, I wanted to say a thank you to the sponsor of this video, which is Dragon City. Now, Dragon City is a free-to-play mobile game available on iOS, Android, and other platforms. And if you want to give it a try, there's a download link in the description below. I'll give you a quick overview of what this game is about. So you can collect hundreds of different types of dragons, breed 2 dragons to get a new one, feed and train your dragons to then battle them. To me, it sounds a little bit like Pokemon, but with extremely cute dragons. You can fight against your friends in multiple PvP modes, and every week there are events to keep it nice and fresh. So if you do want to check it out, make sure to use the link below to download the game and get your special exclusive rewards. Cheers! Surfing damage is an important technique to learn whatever class you play, be it an enemy rocket, bullets, or even a shield to the face. Using the enemy's damage to get a burst of speed can be a lifesaver. But there's a useful trick you can use as a Demoman that uses the same idea, but instead you're using the enemy's body as a surface to jump off, and one of your grenades to instigate that jump. When you're face to face with an opponent and you need to make a quick getaway, you can shoot a grenade at the enemy and crouch jump to escape. This will be quicker than switching to your sticky bomb launcher and also has the added benefit of dealing damage. This can be particularly useful for getting out of the range of demo knights or escaping from heavies who you do not want to be hanging around with for too long. If you don't have any regular stickies at your disposal, perhaps you're playing Hybrid Knight or you're using the sticky jumper, then there's another way to lay a kind of temporary trap which can be really useful in certain situations. The wiki describes them as short-term ground traps, and you can make use of these simply by firing a grenade at the ground in front of where the enemy is heading, so that it explodes as they walk over it. This is particularly effective with the Iron Bomber, of course, as the grenades will stay close to where you fire them. This technique is really useful for when you are low on health and are being chased down corridors or through choke points. You can use this technique to either deter the enemy or, if timed right, deal some damage too. If, for example, you are low on health and you know a scout or a pyro is chasing you, lay down a trail of grenade traps to slow them down and help you escape. Bear in mind that in some situations you may need to aim ahead of yourself if the enemy is following close behind, and generally speaking, I find that this is only useful for when you do not have line of sight on the enemy, for example if they're chasing you round a corner, because if you can see them, then you may as well go for the direct hit. Juggling your opponents to momentarily allow you to predict their movement with much higher accuracy can be very powerful. Although this is something several classes can do, there are techniques that specifically the Demoman can use to his advantage here. As you get more confident with your grenades and sticky bomb launcher, you can use them in ways to increase how often your opponents get juggled into the air, either by simply waiting for the right moment to detonate that sticky, or by aiming lower on the enemy with your grenade launcher. For long range shots or faster moving targets, I wouldn't worry about this too much, and just aiming for center mass to give yourself the best chance of hitting is probably the most reliable option. But when confident and close to the enemy, aim for the feet to force the juggle, and then line up that second shot now that the enemy has no control over their movement. And remember, the closer you are to them, the lower you may have to aim, and vice versa. You may find that generally keeping your crosshair low and aiming at the enemy's feet can be a useful habit to get yourself into. Bear in mind that most of the time the player will continue to travel in the direction they were heading, but when using stickies, you have a bit more control because you can wait to detonate and launch them in a certain direction, for example away from you or into danger. And if you have a big pile of stickies, well then you can even disrupt Ubers by throwing the players into the air, which is always good fun. Using the walls instead of the floor for sticky jumping is always a good option, as it can reduce the height of a jump. But when you are using a corner or doorway as a surface for your sticky jump, then there's a strange little technique that can be very helpful to be aware of. Laying a sticky so that it protrudes as much as possible from the edge that you are laying it on will give you more options when you make the jump, because the blast will be able to take effect in more directions. You can actually aim surprisingly far away from the surface, as often the geometry of the map doesn't quite match up with what you're seeing in the game. Also, remember that stickies don't come out at the centre of your crosshair, so you will have to compensate for this too. But this is easy to get the hang of, and in some cases will allow you to roll out on certain maps much more efficiently. The key is that you can go in any direction from the doorway or edge you are using, which gives you more flexibility as you roll out. If you're unable to sticky jump, for example if you're playing Hybrid Knight but you still need that vertical mobility, then grenade jumping can be a useful alternative. It's a simple technique where the player uses a grenade to propel themselves into the air. This technique is of course much more consistent with the Iron Bomber, as the fuse time is shorter and the grenades will stay where they land. It's easy to do, but the only trick is to learn the timing, which doesn't take very long to get used to, but once you get to grips with it, you can get a surprising amount of height. In my personal experience, I find it always feels like you need to wait a little bit longer than you think. Maybe it's because I'm impatient, but aiming a short distance in front of you can help with the timing. And once you've figured out that perfect distance to aim ahead, it means you won't even have to think about the timing, and also you won't have to wait around awkwardly for the grenade to detonate. In combination with the Demoman's charge, using grenade jumps means you can achieve some spectacular mobility and reach pretty much anywhere on the map in a matter of seconds. Burst damage can be massively important if you're trying to kill enemies that are getting healed or fast moving. By sinking the damage from multiple shots or weapons, you can achieve more burst damage and it may help you secure a kill. But if you detonate a sticky under the enemy's feet, normally they will be juggled, and so hitting a grenade at the same time is actually very tricky, although not impossible. Sometimes the best option then is to shoot a sticky at your opponent's feet as you normally would, but make sure you're aware of where it lays in adjacent to the enemy player. And then, right after you detonate, flick a grenade in the direction they're about to get juggled to get the 1-2 hit. In a way it's like a micro juggle, but this technique can actually be quite reliable. You have to aim where they're about to get juggled and just make sure that you adjust your shot accordingly for how close the sticky is to your opponent and how far away you are to them, of course. There are lots of nuances to using the sticky bomb launcher and grenade launcher together. Here for example, I'm using the grenades to flush out this enemy from behind a rock to then force him to walk over one of my traps. I find that these two weapons can work really well together, and knowing when to switch between the two and when to use them together will generally make you much more effective with Demoman. At first the pogo seems like a gimmick, which has little or no real value in the game, but there are scenarios where this technique can be really useful. For example, when needing to traverse quickly through areas of the map with awkwardly low ceilings or obstacles. Using a horizontal pogo in this case can allow you to do a jump while remaining low to the ground. This jump is of course much more feasible when using the sticky jumper, but can be done without too much risk after getting a buff from a medic or when you know there's a large health pack near the end of your jump. There are two great examples of locations I find this jump to be genuinely useful. This tunnel to the first control point on Badwater, and this section of the sewers on Two Fort. There are many others, but these two always spring to mind, as they're very popular maps, and so I find myself doing these jumps quite regularly. But bear in mind, I normally equip the sticky jumper, so these will not always be realistic depending on your loadout. These kind of jumps can also have great synergy with ramp slides because you are travelling at such a shallow angle and a high speed. Ramp slides are another more advanced mechanic that can be really useful, especially for Soldier and Demo, and are quite commonly used on certain tried and tested map rollouts in the competitive scene. But ramp slides could probably be a tip of their own in another video perhaps. I do have an old video that goes through the steps to help with learning how to pogo. I'll put the link in the description below. It can be a little tricky to get the hang of at first, but with a bit of practice you'll find that it will soon click. And apologies for the video, it's old and all my old videos are trash. Bonus tips! I wanted all of the tips featured in this video to be very specific to the Demoman, but there are loads of other subtle, nuanced and unusual techniques I use in my gameplay that I think will need a video of their own. But to finish off, here's a quick run through of some of those I've noted down that I thought were really interesting. Using buildings, either aiming at buildings to deal splash damage to players close by, or even using buildings to hide behind for cover, especially when dealing with sentry guns. Sniper baiting, either using safety in numbers if you have to cross a sniper's sightline, or let's be honest, using friendlies as cannon fodder. Or something I like to do is to bait shots from snipers using a sticky bomb, which for some reason all snipers cannot resist shooting. Wall hugging, staying close to walls at certain times, especially when being chased and when turning corners or dropping from ledges, will often buy you extra time from your pursuing enemy and maybe even throw them off entirely. Hit sound detection, checking for enemies around corners just by using your hit sound. And finally, grabbing health mid-air before you take full damage. If you aim your jump right, and if you're low on health, you can actually grab a health pack just before you land, which I know has certainly saved me once or twice in the past. Let me know if there are any interesting techniques you use, especially when playing Demoman. I'd love to know if I missed anything. Thank you all so much for your support. 100k much. 100k subscribers isn't the worst amount of subscribers, I'm not going to lie to you. I will make a 100k special, which no one will care about, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's a huge deal for me and it's been a goal of mine for a very long time. So thank you so much for watching, thank you for liking, thank you for leaving comments and engaging and chatting with me, and of course for pressing that precious sub button. I really appreciate it, and a special thank you to my Patreons, including Japheth720, who recently upgraded his pledge. I really appreciate it, guys, and I love you all very much. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks again to the sponsor of this video, Dragon City. You can download this for free using the link below.
On the point, you Thank you, Doctor. Mission begins. You're doing good, lad. All at spot. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Schwein on.